In the aftermath of a recent mass shooting which killed 2 and wounded at least 6 others, the MAGA movement seems to have lost its collective minds, with Donald Trump indicating that his administration will take no meaningful effort to curb gun violence out of veneration for the Second Amendment. Elected Republicans are indicating that the best way to curb gun violence is actually to put guns in the hands of more people. And MAGA influencers like Loomer are desperate to try to spin the blame, blaming the left, when in fact the evidence indicates that the culprit, who was taken into custody successfully, was in fact a Republican MAGA supporter. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have a lot to talk about, as I'm sure most of you are aware. Yesterday, there was a mass shooting at Florida State University. 2 were killed, at least 6 others were wounded, and the culprit was taken into custody. He was not killed by law enforcement. So there's a lot to unpack. We're going to get into some clips of Trump, but this has taken on a political bent because of Trump's inaction and because MAGA is desperate to blame the left. So we're going to start there. MAGA influencer Laura Loomer claims FSU shooter hated Trump despite mountain of unsubtle clues that he was a Trump fan. Conspiracy theorist and MAGA influencer Laura Loomer insisted that Florida State University mass shooting suspect, and the name is on here, but I don't want to signal boost the guy's name, screw that guy, hated Donald Trump despite clear clues that he supports Donald Trump, including in an article Loomer herself posted. The shooter was taken into custody after a mass shooting at FSU that killed 2 and injured at least 6 others. In the aftermath of the shooting, Loomer posted a message on X/Twitter blaming the left for the shooting. So let's take a look at those posts. The alleged shooter at FSU today hated Trump. I know the media was salivating over the thought that they could blame it on a Trump supporter. When will the left start to come to terms with the fact that they have radicalized people to commit violence? There's no doubt that leftists, liberals, progressives are capable of committing violence, but the statistics are overwhelmingly clear. The vast majority of lethal domestic political violence is conducted by the right, not the left. Here's another message that she posted. It was a internet archive of the original post. So, the post featured a quote by the shooter from an FSU news article about a January anti-Trump protest. Quote, "These people are usually pretty entertaining, usually not for good reasons," the shooter said. Quote, "I think it's a little too late. He's already going to be inaugurated on January 20th, and there's not really much you can do unless you outright revolt, and I don't think anyone wants that." The quote clearly indicates antipathy for the anti-Trump protesters, and indeed it does. He's basically mocking them. He's patronizing them. Oh, these people are losers. There's nothing they can do about it unless they want to revolt, but there's no way they're going to do that. Multiple outlets have reported that the shooter is a registered Republican and was photographed wearing a MAGA hat. Let's take a look at that picture. MAGA hat. And at least one former classmate named Reed Siebold told NBC News in multiple interviews that the shooter was a member of the pro-Trump group Turning Point USA and held white supremacist views. So this is a quote from Siebold. So actually, I spent my first 2 years at Tallahassee, now called Tallahassee State College, but we called it TCC. And I was the president of a political talk group that we called the Political Roundtable. And the shooter joined the club when I was at TCC. Our only role was no Nazis for all, colloquially speaking, and he espoused so much white supremacist rhetoric and far-right rhetoric as well, to the point where we had to exercise that rule. Okay, apparently there's a misquote. It's supposed to be rule, not roll. So their only rule was no Nazis. I know he was also a member of the TCC Turning Point chapter, and since TCC, I've seen him in passing a couple of times. So again, based on the available evidence now, the FSU shooter seems to be a Trump-supporting Republican, MAGA Republican. Could the evidence change? I guess it's possible. But since Laura Loomer brought it up, the evidence, the preponderance of the evidence, the overwhelming evidence indicates that no, he was a Trump supporter radicalized into violence. So, with that in mind, speaking of Trump, let's play these clips of Donald Trump and his callous, indifferent response, again, to a mass shooting which killed 2 and wounded at least 6 others.
President, we're learning that there are now 2 deceased following that shooting at Florida State University. Following and amid that, is there any changes that you want to see to gun legislation? Anything you see broken with gun laws in our country?
I'm going to have to look. I'm a big advocate of the Second Amendment. I have been from the beginning. I protected it, and these things are terrible. But the gun doesn't do the shooting, the people do. It's, a phrase that's used probably too often. I will tell you that it's a shame. I'm just hearing about it now. I just hear about it. I know the area very well. I know the school very well. I know everything about it. It's Florida. And we'll have more to say about it later.
What do you mean when you say there will be more to say about it?
Only in terms of what happened. As far as legislation is concerned, this has been going on for a long time. I have an obligation to protect the Second Amendment. I ran on the Second Amendment, among many other things, and I will always protect the Second Amendment.
So, if that wasn't clear, what Trump is indicating is a total opposition, either for sincerely held beliefs at this point, or I would argue cynical political expedience. He's opposing any sort of gun legislation, gun reform, anything like that. He says the reason he has to basically avoid any sort of legislative attempt to curb gun violence is out of veneration for the Second Amendment. We'll get into that in just a second, but here's another clip of Trump in the Oval Office being asked about this.
Everybody, and I've been briefed on these Florida State University, Tallahassee, active shooting. I guess it's an active shooting. Fully briefed as to where we are right now. It's a shame. It's a horrible thing. Horrible that things like this take place. And we'll have more to say about it later. Everybody.
So again, just a shame things like these happen, not even bothering with the thoughts and prayers, trite expression that we hear from Republicans. And listen, thoughts and prayers are fine, but we expect more from people in power. Thoughts and prayers are what you get from your neighbors, people who don't have power but mean well and are hoping the best for you. Donald Trump and Republicans actually wield power. They have the ability to at least make a meaningful attempt to reduce gun violence in this country, and they're not even bothering. They offer the performative thoughts and prayers in the past. Trump is not even bothering to go through that rote bullshit. He's just like, sucks, but anyway, anything else? So a student was asked about this and directly addressed Trump and the Republicans.
Gonna call on Governor Ron DeSantis, the President Donald Trump for this stuff keeps going on, right? But we're praying every day. Prayer is good. Spirituality is good, but prayers don't do much, right? So it's good for the soul, but is this still happening? I think it is. So we need to make some gun reforms,
or at least try, right? At least make an actual concerted effort. How about we put the effort in? And if it doesn't work, then we can pare back the legislation or we can try something else. How about, given that the United States experiences a disproportionate amount of gun violence compared to any other advanced country on earth? As John Stewart, I'll get into that in just a second. But again, the point being that when you have power, when you are elected to high office and you are expected to wield that power responsibly for the benefit of your constituents, be you a congressman, be you a governor, be you the president of the United States, you're just obligated morally and civically to do more than say, sending good vibes your way. How about we try to wield the power that you have to make a better result? Now, a congressman or an elected Republican actually has an idea. Greg Stube, he's like, listen, man, I've got it all figured out. I've figured out here's what we need to do to reduce the amount of gun violence in this country to prevent mass shootings. Here you go.
But for years and years and years, I sponsored legislation when I was in the state house and state senate to allow concealed carry on university campuses. And time again, we have seen these lone gun shooters go after gun-free zones. Time and time again, this has happened. It's like the statistics are like 80%. These people target gun-free zones, and Americans, law-abiding citizens, should be able to defend themselves. And we'll never know if somebody would have been there to be able to defend very quickly from this. And
again, so he's saying, listen, we need more guns. If more students and faculty had guns, no problem. Like you want to reduce shootings, make available and proliferate the object which does the shoot. Like, you know what? You want to prevent fires. You want to prevent arson. Give people matches and gasoline, right? It's insane. It really is. But I'll say, like, he's not even offering, like, that's his idea. It's a terrible idea, but he's offering one. I'll also point out too, Jon Stewart had a really good point years ago when he had his when he went back to TV before he went back to the Daily Show last year or the year before. Like a couple of years ago, he was on an Apple TV show called The Problem, and he interviewed Republican lawmakers, and he said, the logic of we need more guns equals more safe, right? Well, if that's the case, we have more guns. There are more guns in the United States than there are people. I'm almost certain the United States has per capita the biggest concentration of guns certainly out of any advanced country on earth, and yet we are less safe. So Jon Stewart's point was, if your logic is more guns equals more safe, at what point does that actually manifest? Because we already have more guns than any other country on earth, and we're less safe than many other countries that have fewer guns. You see, the logic doesn't add up. And maybe, maybe gun reform legislation, maybe gun control legislation, maybe it won't produce the intended effect. But how about we try? We've tried the whole more guns equals more safe. We've tried it for years and years and years and years, if not decades, and it hasn't really worked out. So how about we try like the other thing? Give it a good faith effort and see what happens. Maybe it'll surprise us. But there you go. MAGA's collective meltdown. Donald Trump, totally indifferent. Yeah, I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to try about it because the Second Amendment means you can't have gun control. You can't have gun reforms. Now, I'll point out in the 2008 Heller decision, which was made by the Supreme Court, it was a conservative outcome. Justice Scalia wrote in that decision that the Supreme Court, the interpretation, and they're supposed to be the constitutional arbiters, they are supposed to be the final authority on what the Constitution says. Even Scalia, a far right Supreme Court justice, said the Second Amendment is not an absolute right. That under certain circumstances, the government has an interest to curb and restrain gun rights. It's not absolute. People are not entitled to have a nuclear weapon or a tank. There are limits. Now, obviously, there's a lot of disagreement about where you draw the line, but the fact that a line can be drawn is not in dispute by the legal authorities in this country. So this idea that we can't do anything about it because of the Second Amendment is bullshit and stupid and ahistorical and anti-constitutional. And yet, these are the people in power, and so nothing will be done about it, except occasionally thoughts and prayers and suggestions that maybe we arm more people. And the COPE, again, getting all the way back to the very beginning, the COPE from far-right lunatics like Laura Loomer, the registered Republican MAGA hat-wearing Republican conservative white supremacist, is actually a progressive. Make it make sense. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.